Welcome everyone to another session on Current Affairs by Civis 360 IAS Academy. So in this session we will be discussing about the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons as well as how the nuclear governance happens at the international level. So in Current Affairs we see that Iran is being attacked by US and Israel. Right. So one of the reasons that has been given for the attack was that Iran was actually planning to develop nuclear weapons which it would have used to attack Israel and other countries in the region. Right. So we need to study about the different treaties that is underlying or governing the nuclear energy at the international level. Okay. So first of all, before that, you need to know about few terms. Okay. Like for example, Iran has been described as a nuclear latent state. Okay, nuclear latent, or what we call as nuclear latency. Okay, these kind of states, countries, they are very close to developing nuclear weapons. Okay, so basically they have the expertise, they have the infrastructure, okay, they have the technology. The only thing they need is time. Okay, so they have all this and they are very close to developing a nuclear weapon on their own. Okay, they are also known as para-nuclear states. Like for example, Japan is an example. They have everything. Okay, so Iran was also being called as a nuclear latent state. Okay, another terminology, because all these weaponization and attacks are happening, you need to know about countervalue and counterforce targets. Okay. It's very simple, but the terminology seems seems complicated. Okay, counter force and counter value. Okay, so in a nuclear conflict or in any general conflict, if you are actually targeting targeting assets that has value but that do not pose any military threat. Like for example, you are targeting cities, civilian infrastructure, schools, like that, all those kind of targets that have value but they do not pose any direct military threat. It's called counter value. Okay, so the nuclear weapon, they do not discriminate between nuclear counter value and counter force. Okay, that is one of the reasons it has such a deterrent value. Okay, because counter force is you are actually targeting assets that has a military threat, that pose a military threat to you. Okay, the nuclear energy or nuclear weapons, they do not discriminate between these two. Okay, this is another concept you have to keep in mind. Okay, now to talk about nuclear energy itself. Okay, nuclear energy, or one of the important characteristics of nuclear energy is that it is a dual use technology, right? It has dual uses. So if you have nuclear, to talk about nuclear energy, we know that the naturally found uranium is actually uranium 238, right? 238 is the naturally found uranium, but for developing nuclear energy and all this, you need a fissile uranium, which is uranium 235. Okay, so you need 235. What you have is 238, and about 0.7% of the naturally found uranium is only uranium 235. So the concentration of uranium 235 is very less. So what we have is large centrifugal machines, right? So they combine uranium with they use uranium hexafluoride UF6, and then they will rotate it at very high speeds, and uranium 238 being heavier, it will it's more denser. Okay, it is more denser, it will go to the outside of the centrifuge and you can remove it, and what you get is the refined uranium with high concentration of uranium 235. Now if the concentration is like about 5 to 8% and all, or even less than 20%, it's actually usable for civilian uses. Okay, civilian uses for peaceful uses. Okay, to generate electricity, to generate energy, right? But if you enrich it beyond 90%, it becomes weapons grade uranium. Okay, so that is basically the underlying ideas. Okay, so since it has a dual use, there is a high chance for nuclear proliferation. Okay, so the first treaty, or first of all, so let's take weapons of uranium. Alright, so to prevent a nuclear non-proliferation, you need a treaty. Okay, you need an agreement. You need an institution. Right, but you also need to ensure that the nuclear energy or the nuclear weapons, that is nuclear energy, it can also be used for nuclear energy, right? So the nuclear fuel can also be used for nuclear energy. So for civilian users, you need another institution to ensure that some sort of trade is allowed. Okay, you can actually supply uranium, but to ensure that they are only used for civilian or peaceful purpose. So you need a separate institution for that as well. So for each of these, you have different institution. To prevent the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, you have the NPT. Okay, and to govern or to look after the entire nuclear governance, you have an institution, the International Atomic Energy Agency, headquarters at Vienna, right? Headquartered at Vienna. Right. Then to ensure that a nuclear fuel is actually used for peaceful or civilian users, you have the nuclear suppliers group. Okay, but everything is actually interlinked. So let's take first of all the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is in force. It was signed in 1967 and it has entered into force in 1970. Okay, it has about 191 members. Okay, remember India is not a party. India has not even signed Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Okay, Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, or short NPT. Okay, one of the reasons why India has not signed is that, so according to NPT, they say that they divide states into two types: nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. Okay, so according to NPT, those states that have tested a nuclear weapon before Jan 1 of 1967 is described as a nuclear weapon state. Okay, so that includes China, France, US, UK, okay, USSR, all those countries. Okay, so these 5 nuclear weapon states, okay. So NPT says that then all the other states are actually non-nuclear weapon states. Okay, and if you want to join NPT, this non-nuclear, you will be treated as a non-nuclear weapon state, and you will have to declare that you will never develop nuclear weapons. Okay, you will never develop nuclear weapons. Okay, so that is one of the conditions of joining NPT. Okay, so the IAEA International Atomic Energy Agency, which is established in 1957. Okay, 1957. It is also known as Atoms for Peace group as well. So it is not actually part of the UN. The IAEA is not actually part of the UN, but it reports to the United Nations General Assembly as well as United Nations Security Council. So NPT and IAEA is actually linked because IAEA has the authority to, the NPT members, you have non-nuclear weapon states. The non-nuclear weapon states, they have to enter into a agreement with IAEA, okay, as well, okay, to ensure that they do not develop nuclear weapons. Okay, so they will be under the monitoring of IAEA. So that is one of the reasons why India has not joined NPT. One, the non-nuclear weapon states, they have to promise that they have to legally ensure that they have a binding obligation that they will never develop nuclear weapons. And Jan 1, 1967 is an arbitrary date. We developed our first nuclear test was on 1974, Operation Smiling Buddha, right? Pokhran 1. So India will be excluded. So if India is going to join NPT as of now, as NPT is today, we will become a non-nuclear weapon state, and we will have to give a legally binding rule that we have to follow that we will never develop nuclear weapons. And obviously, one of the reasons that Iran actually got attacked was the Israel and US was sure that they had no nuclear weapons, right? If Israel and US were sure that Iran had nuclear weapons, they would not have attacked. So nuclear weapon is actually an effective deterrence. Okay, one of the reasons that Russia is going, over Ukraine is because Ukraine actually gave up their stockpile on after the dissolution of USSR, right? So all these things are actually related. That is why India has not joined NPT. Okay. Now, to talk about the International Atomic Energy Agency, so like for example, it has various what you can say agreements. So it is another agency. Okay, it has another agency. It has its own treaty. Okay, and India is part of that treaty. India is part of the IAEA fully. It's a full member. So, but IAEA has a separate treaty. Okay, it has a separate agreement. So, according to IAEA, it has an additional protocol. So, effectively, the International Atomic Energy Agency, okay, it will you will have to whenever you are party to the IAEA, you have to give access to the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors to visit your nuclear production site, ensure that there is no weaponization. Okay, you will have to ensure material accountancy. So there is a 3-pillar framework. Okay, 3-pillar framework that IAEA actually uses to what you can say. So in recent news, IAEA actually certified that they did not find any weaponization of nuclear in Iran. That was also there in news. So basically what they look at is that they will look at the material accountancy. Okay, they will look into how much uranium has been went in, or how much uranium has been produced. Is there any plutonium which is also can be used for weaponization? Is that being produced? Okay, then they will also ensure physical security. What is the security of the infrastructure used for production of nuclear energy? Is that secure? Is there any risk of any nuclear leak? Okay, then they will also look into containment and surveillance. So those are the 3 pillars. So whenever a particular UPSC may ask, okay, what are the criteria on the basis of which IAEA actually conducts inspections? Okay, what are the broad heads of its analysis of a particular country? Okay, nuclear production in a particular country. They will look at material accountancy, they will look into the physical security, they will look at containment and surveillance. Okay, now they have an additional protocol in 1993 in which the IAEA will get, inspectors will get visa-free access. Okay, it has improved the disclosures of by the countries who are party to the IAEA, right? So if India has a nuclear site which is producing nuclear energy, it has to disclose, it has to allow inspections, it has to certify that it is not being used for another weaponization. Okay, like for example, North Korea had actually, even though they were actually party to the NPT also, they actually resented it. Okay, then they weaponized it. Right, so that was actually because IAEA had pointed out that North Korea was weaponizing nuclear energy. So IAEA is the institution that ensures that the nuclear energy is not being diverted for weaponization. Keep that in mind. Okay, so that is about IAEA. Now what we have is the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Okay, so Nuclear Suppliers Group actually it comes from the Zanger's Committee. Okay, Zanger's Committee of NPT. Okay, so according to the Zanger's Committee, or what you can say as the Nuclear Exporter Committee of the NPT, they refers to the nuclear weapon states, and these members of this is the same. When we talk about Zanger Committee, we are referring to the nuclear exporters under NPT. Okay, they actually give an undertaking that they will not give material, they will not give their technology that can be used to build nuclear weapons. Okay, that's also part of the NPT mechanism. Just keep that term in mind. So this Zanger Committee, okay, it later developed into the London's group, okay, or the Nuclear Suppliers Group, or London's group of suppliers. That is, these nations, they have nuclear weapons and they will also provide nuclear fuel for peaceful purposes. Okay, so for peaceful purposes. So that is the purpose of NSG. NSG was formulated in 1974. Okay, it was after the Indian test, okay, Operation Pokhran 1, that NSG was actually negotiated. Okay, it has 48 members. Okay, it has 48 members. So to talk about the NSG, one of the criteria to get, so what is the purpose of NSG is that, NSG says that the nuclear weapon states, they will give you nuclear fuel so that you can develop nuclear energy on your own. Okay, the nuclear weapon states. But the thing is, if you want to get the nuclear energy, you should be party to the NPT. Okay, so if you want nuclear energy, or if you want to develop electric energy from nuclear fuel, you need to be part of the NPT. Okay, you need to be part of NSG, but to be part of NSG, you need to be part of NPT. Right, and so India is not actually part of NSG, but it has got a waiver from the NSG mechanism in the 2008. That was a diplomatic success for India because India has nuclear weapons and it has not been ostracized on the international scale. Okay, it is not being a victim of Iran like sanctions or nothing like that. Sanctions were there in the initial part, but in 2008 it was a diplomatic success, the 123 agreement and all. But anyway, so that is the basic idea of NSG. Okay, so in NSG, the nuclear weapon states will say, okay, we will provide you nuclear energy, you can use that resources, technology and everything to build reactors to generate energy, but you should not use it for weaponization. There also IAEA agreement is there. That is NSG guidelines say that each members have to negotiate an agreement with International Atomic Energy Agency. So always, whenever you have a nuclear reactor, it will be susceptible. It has to be open to the inspections and monitoring by International Atomic Energy Agency. Everything is interlinked. Okay. So that is another important thing you have to keep in mind. So that is the idea, basic idea. Now what we have is in 1996, a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty has been formulated, but it is not yet in force. Okay, comprehensive test ban treaty 1996. Okay, it is not in force. Okay, about 187 members have signed it, but it's not ratified because of the nuclear weapons. Like US and all have not signed it, ratified it. Okay. India is also what you can say has not ratified it, so keep that also in mind. So whenever you study nuclear governance, you need to understand about NPT, you need to understand about the International Atomic Energy Agency, then you need to go into various terms. Zanger Committee, it refers to the nuclear export nations. Then also keep in mind the London's group. Okay, then you go to study NSG. Okay, then how is that nuclear governance is actually taking place. Okay, then just have a brief idea about how nuclear energy is being used. Okay, that centrifugal mechanism also. Okay, so that's all in this session. Thank you.